Hands where I can see them. Now, don't make me say it again. The command, sharp as broken glass, sliced through the quiet hum of the grocery store. Fluorescent lights glinted off the pistol aimed squarely at Julian Hayes' chest. He stood frozen in the cereal aisle, a wave of disbelief crashing into a wall of cold, rising anger. Slowly, he raised his hands. "Officer, there's a misunderstanding here," Julian said. His voice was steady, a practiced calm that defied the frantic hammering in his chest. The cop, young and puffed up with authority, had a name tag that read Becker. His face was a mask of tight, red-faced aggression. The gun didn't waver. "Misunderstanding? You think I'm an idiot?" he sneered. "Something's not right about you. You fit the description." "What description is that?" Becker's lips twisted into a smirk. "The one in my head. You're lurking, scoping the place out. I know exactly what you're about. Rob the place?" The accusation hit Julian with the force of a physical blow. Julian Hayes, a 20-year veteran of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, being profiled as a common thief by some jumped-up patrolman. The sheer, naked arrogance of it, the blatant power play in the middle of a Saturday afternoon, was humiliating. How did a trip for milk and eggs escalate to this? To understand the depth of the insult, you have to understand the man staring down the barrel of that gun. At 45, Julian Hayes was one of the FBI's most respected agents, specializing in the brutal, complex worlds of organized crime and domestic terrorism. He wasn't the kind of black man Officer Becker expected to meet in the suburbs of Crestwood. He was disciplined, accomplished, and moved with a quiet confidence that came from 2 decades of facing down real monsters. He'd clawed his way out of a tough, blue-collar neighborhood on the other side of Crestwood, the very town he'd recently returned to. It was a place where prejudice was a quiet poison, always present just beneath the surface. Julian had poured everything he had into his education and career, driven by a relentless need to rise above the low expectations set for him. He was a man who lived by evidence and integrity, and now he was being treated like a menace because of the color of his skin. What made the situation even more bitter was his lifelong friendship with Crestwood's chief of police, Frank Donovan. They'd grown up together on these same streets, playing basketball in the same parks. Julian left for college and then Quantico, while Frank joined the local force and rose through the ranks. They remained close, their bond built on years of mutual respect. Frank knew exactly who Julian was. That Saturday, Julian was just another husband running errands. Dressed in jeans, a casual button-down, and a light jacket, he blended in with the weekend shoppers at community grocers. He was pushing his cart, trying to remember if his wife wanted whole wheat or sourdough, when Officer Kyle Becker decided to make him a target. Becker was young, maybe 24, and barely a year on the force. He carried his authority like a weapon and his racial bias like a shield. He saw a black man in an aisle, and his mind, poisoned by prejudice, saw a threat. He didn't see a father, a husband, or a federal agent. He saw a problem to be solved with force. Without a single report of theft, without any probable cause, he decided to act. He marched toward Julian, his posture instantly aggressive. "You! Hold it right there!" Becker barked, his voice loud and abrasive. Julian turned, startled by the hostility. He saw the cop's angry scowl and stopped his cart. "Yes, officer?" he asked, his tone even and respectful. "Is there a problem?" "What are you doing in this store?" Becker demanded, his voice dripping with suspicion. He invaded Julian's personal space, his eyes raking over him, judging him. "I'm shopping for groceries," Julian replied, his confusion hardening into annoyance. "You look like you're up to no good," Becker said, the disgust in his voice unconcealed. "I've been watching you since you came in. Why are you just lingering in the aisles?" "I was deciding on cereal," Julian stated, his jaw tight. "I live in Crestwood. This is my neighborhood." "Cut the crap," Becker snarled, his prejudice overriding any sense of procedure. "You don't look like you belong around here. Where are you really from?" "I already told you, I live in Crestwood," Julian repeated, a sharp edge entering his voice now. His patience was gone. This was pure, uncut discrimination. "Let's see some identification." "Now!" Becker demanded, his voice cracking with adrenaline as he dropped a hand to the grip of his holstered pistol. "And why would I do that?" Julian countered, his knowledge of the law kicking in. He was a federal agent. He knew his rights cold. "I haven't committed a crime. You have no reasonable suspicion to demand my ID while I'm buying food for my family." Julian's calm, informed response was like gasoline on a fire. To Becker, it wasn't a citizen exercising his rights. It was a criminal challenging his authority. The officer's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. "You want to obstruct an officer? Is that what's happening?" Becker shouted, his voice pitching higher. "I have every right to investigate suspicious individuals. And you, my friend, are suspicious as hell." He took another step forward, closing the distance until they were inches apart. "I'm not obstructing anything," Julian said, his voice dropping to a low, controlled tone. The years of FBI training took over, a cold professionalism encasing the rage. He looked into Becker's eyes and saw the toxic cocktail swirling within. Panic, arrogance, and a deep-seated racism looking for a reason to explode. "Hands up! Get your hands up! I said get them up now!" Becker bellowed, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and fear. He ripped his pistol from its holster and leveled it at Julian's heart. The metallic click echoed in the aisle. Shoppers froze, their eyes wide with shock. The humiliation was a physical weight pressing down on Julian, but beneath it, a diamond-hard resolve formed. This rookie, this bigot, had crossed a line. Julian's mind raced, assessing the situation like a field agent. Engage physically? Suicide. Reason with him? Impossible. Show him my FBI credentials? He's too keyed up. Might see it as a threat and fire. There was only one move left. A move Becker would never anticipate. A move that would not only end this confrontation, but would detonate the officer's career. He had to call Frank. With his hands still raised, Julian's voice became unnervingly calm. "Officer," he said, each word deliberate and clear, "you are making a career-ending mistake. I suggest you lower your weapon." Becker laughed, a short, ugly bark of derision. "You're in no position to suggest anything. Who do you think you are?" "I want to speak to your superior," Julian stated. "I want to speak to the chief of police." The mockery on Becker's face intensified. "The chief? You think calling for the chief is going to scare me? What, is he your buddy?" "That's exactly right," Julian said, his eyes locking onto Becker's. "I'm calling him Chief Frank Donovan, and when he finds out you pulled a gun on me in the cereal aisle, he is going to lose his mind." The name Frank Donovan hit Becker like a stun gun. The angry red drained from his face, replaced by a pasty white. He knew the chief's reputation. He knew the man valued loyalty above all else. Doubt, then raw fear, flickered in his eyes. You're bluffing," Becker stammered. But the bravado was gone, his voice a panicked whisper. "Am I?" Julian asked softly. He moved with calculated slowness, lowering his right hand into Becker's line of sight. He pulled his cell phone from his jacket pocket. "I'm dialing him right now. You can explain it to him yourself." Becker stood paralyzed, his gun still aimed at Julian, but his arm had started to tremble. The terror was blooming on his face. The horrifying possibility that this was real. He watched as Julian unlocked the phone, scrolled to a contact, and pressed the call button. The ringing of the phone was the only sound in the suffocating silence of the aisle. "Julian? What's up?" Chief Donovan's voice, clear and familiar, came through the speaker. "Frank," Julian said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I'm at Community Grocers, aisle 7. I'm having an issue with one of your officers." "An issue? What kind of issue?" Donovan's tone sharpened instantly. Julian's eyes bored into Becker, who looked like he'd just seen a ghost. "Officer Kyle Becker," Julian said, letting the name hang in the air. "He decided I looked suspicious while shopping. He's been harassing me, and now he has his service weapon pointed at my chest. Apparently, being a black man buying cereal is a crime in this town." A dead silence fell on the other end of the line. For a full 5 seconds, nothing. Then Donovan's voice came back, low and vibrating with a cold rage Julian had only heard a few times in his life. "He has a gun on you? For shopping? Julian, don't you move. Don't even breathe. I'm on my way. Right now." Julian ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He stared at Officer Becker, whose face was now slick with sweat, his complexion a sickly gray. He had heard every word. He had aimed a gun at the chief's best friend. The man he'd profiled and insulted had a direct line to the one person who could end his career. You really know the chief," Becker stammered, his voice barely a croak. "I told you I did," Julian replied, his voice like ice. "And he's coming. I imagine you have a lot to answer for." The terror in Becker's eyes was absolute. The full, catastrophic weight of his actions crashed down on him. His hand trembled violently as he slowly, shakily, lowered his pistol. He began to babble, a pathetic stream of apologies. I, I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't know. I swear, I had no idea. It wasn't remorse. It was the panicked squeal of a man seeing his life's work circle the drain. Less than 5 minutes later, an unmarked sedan screeched to a halt outside the store. Chief Frank Donovan emerged, not in uniform, but carrying an aura of command that was unmistakable. He stormed through the automatic doors, his eyes scanning the aisles until he saw them. He saw his oldest friend Julian, standing tense and rigid. And he saw Officer Becker, pale and shaking, gun still clutched in his fist. A thundercloud of fury settled over the chief's face. He strode directly to Julian, ignoring Becker completely. "Jules, are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Donovan's voice was filled with genuine concern. "I'm fine, Frank," Julian said. "Just shaken. No harm done, aside from the gun in my face and a lecture on how I don't belong in my own neighborhood." Donovan's head snapped toward Becker. His gaze was glacial. "Officer Becker," he began, his voice dangerously low, "what in God's name do you think you're doing? Why do you have your weapon drawn on a civilian?" He paused, letting the weight of the question hang in the air before delivering the final blow. "On FBI Special Agent Julian Hayes, FBI Special Agent." If it was possible, Becker turned even paler. The world tilted on its axis. Not just the chief's friend, a Fed, an FBI agent. Every racist assumption, every ounce of his smug authority evaporated into pure, cold dread. "Agent," Becker choked out, his eyes darting between the furious chief and the stone-faced man he had just threatened. "Chief, I didn't know. I swear." "You didn't know." Donovan cut him off, his voice laced with contempt. "Or you didn't care. You saw a black man and you made a choice. You chose to harass an innocent citizen. You chose to threaten my friend. You chose to draw your weapon on a federal agent." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Give me your weapon. Now. Then your badge and your radio." His voice dropped to a growl. "Report to the station, my office. You are suspended, effective immediately." Shaking uncontrollably, Becker fumbled to holster his weapon. He unclipped his badge and radio, his hands trembling so badly he almost dropped them. He handed them over to the chief, his face a mess of sweat and tears. "Chief, I'm sorry. Agent Hayes, please. I made a mistake." Julian stared back at him, his expression unreadable, his silence more damning than any words. He didn't want an apology born of fear. Donovan gestured to two uniformed officers who had just arrived. "Escort him out." Becker stumbled away, a broken man, muttering apologies as he was led from the store. When he was gone, Donovan let out a long, heavy breath, the anger on his face replaced by shame and exhaustion. "Julian, I am so sorry. I can't tell you how much. For one of my guys to do this, to you, it's not on you, Frank," Julian said, though the humiliation still burned. "But you've got a problem in your department. If he did this to me, what's he doing to people who can't call you?" Donovan's face hardened, his expression grim. "I hear you, Jules, loud and clear. This poison has no place in my department. I'm going to cut it out, starting now." Back at headquarters, the machine of justice moved with lightning speed. Chief Donovan personally handed the case to his most ruthless internal affairs captain and said two words: "No mercy." The investigation was swift and brutal. Julian provided a calm, precise, and utterly damning written statement. He detailed every condescending word, every microaggression, and the final, reckless act of drawing a weapon without cause. Becker, in his interview, fell apart. He was a sweating, desperate mess, trying to invent a narrative where he was the victim. He claimed Julian was acting suspiciously and that he felt threatened when Julian reached for his phone, a lie the timeline immediately dismantled. His excuses were pathetic, transparent attempts to save his own skin. But the final nail in his coffin was the high-definition security footage from community grocers. From 4 different angles, the video showed it all. Becker's aggressive, predatory approach, Julian's calm, non-threatening posture, the moment Becker drew his weapon on a man who was simply standing still, and the instant panicked collapse of his authority during the phone call. It was an undeniable frame-by-frame record of gross misconduct and racial profiling. The IA report was a career execution order. It listed a litany of violations: abuse of authority, excessive force, unlawful detention, dereliction of duty, and blatant discrimination. The recommendation was not just termination, but a referral to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. The disciplinary hearing was a formality, a final stage for the public humiliation of Kyle Becker. He sat with a union lawyer, his face ashen, unable to refute the crystal-clear video evidence played for the board. His lawyer bleated about his youth and inexperience, a stressful mistake. But Chief Donovan, presiding over the hearing, was having none of it. He created the stress. Donovan's voice boomed in the silent room. He created the confrontation. He chose to escalate a situation that existed only in his own prejudiced mind. The board's decision was unanimous. Chief Donovan looked directly at Becker, his eyes filled with cold disgust. He didn't read from a paper. He delivered the verdict from memory. Officer Kyle Becker, your actions were a disgrace to this department and to the badge you wore. Your employment with the Crestwood Police Department is terminated, effective immediately. Becker sat there, a hollowed-out shell. It was over. His job, his career, his reputation, all gone. But Donovan wasn't finished. Two internal affairs officers approached the table. One placed a resignation form in front of Becker. You will sign this now, Donovan commanded, or we will proceed with a criminal prosecution for aggravated assault and official misconduct. Your choice. With a hand that shook so violently he could barely hold the pen, Becker signed his career away. The second officer then slid a plastic bag across the table. Your locker has been cleared out. You will be escorted from the building. You are not to set foot on this property again. The finality was absolute. The justice was swift and deeply satisfying. For Julian Hayes, it was a painful reminder of a fight that was far from over. But seeing the system he believed in work, seeing a corrupt officer stripped of his power so completely, provided a profound sense of closure. He hadn't just stood up for himself, he had ensured Kyle Becker would never again have the power to terrorize another citizen just for the color of their skin.